Coming up on episode 60 of Create If Writing, we are talking about how to decide between free and paid tools.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light. These restless thoughts have kept me up again tonight.
Hello and welcome to Create If Writing, the podcast for writers, bloggers, and creatives, all about building an online platform without being smarmy. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant, and I'm so glad that you're listening today. Episode 60. And I feel like when I did that first intro part, the way I said tools was really weird. Tools. I'm going to be saying it a lot because this episode is literally all about tools. And the reason is I feel like this is something I don't hear people talk about a lot. They talk about tools, but not how to decide. And man, in the last year, I have found so many things I want to spend money on that trying to figure out what to actually put down the money for and then what things I don't need, it's just been really hard. And so I have a bunch of questions that are the kinds of questions that I ask myself when it comes to buying and investing in a tool and deciding if I could just use something free instead, because I'm cheap and I'm also on a budget. I want to keep my costs down. And I think there are so many things I could invest in. I feel like you probably feel the same way. There's so many things coming up. If you're a member of AppSumo, do you get those emails? Every week they're sending me something where I'm like, I must buy this. And then I have to remind myself that I bought something last week that I still haven't used. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, really briefly, I just wanted to say also, if you haven't listened or if you're listening for the first time, this is episode 60. It's coming out on a Thursday. I have been, at least for a time, doing 2 episodes a week. On Mondays, I do an interview episode and have been repurposing episodes from last year's Business to Blogger podcast, which is no longer with us. Moment of silence. And then on Thursdays, I'm just doing a solo episode where I'm talking about something that is kind of top of mind for me or that relates to a question that you guys have had in the Facebook group. If you're not a part of our Facebook group, it really is the place to be. You can find it at createifwriting.com/community. And the show notes for this episode, which are going to have a lot of what I say and also some links to tools and things that I use, you can find the show notes at createifwriting.com/060 for episode 60. So I'm going to start and really just kind of go through some questions that I ask myself and that I think would be helpful for you to ask yourself as you're considering which tools to use and I should define tools too. I'm using the term really loosely here. I think mostly I'm thinking about things that you could use like schedulers or programs or, blog themes, or I'll mention some by name, but really, I even consider, I'm kind of thinking about investments in general, and I may do another episode on how to decide to invest in courses or something else that's really specific. But mostly I'm talking about the kinds of tools like your email service provider, or if you're paying a service to schedule things to Pinterest, for example. Those are the kinds of tools that I'm talking about. So when it comes to those tools, there are a million, and most of them have like a free and a paid version. There are some tools that do not have a free version at all, but many of them do. And of course, their paid versions are often better, but we don't all have unlimited budgets. So when you're thinking about all these tools, you've got to figure out how to pay for them. So let's talk about that. And before we even get into my questions, I'm going to go and tell you that you need to know your why. And you're going to hear it every time we talk about basically anything having to do with strategy and making decisions in your business. If you don't know your why, your end goals, why you're doing what you're doing, what you plan to accomplish, if you don't know those things, it's going to be really hard to make these decisions, because as a lens, you really need to look at everything else through. And so you need to think about that. And you also need to think about your budget. So before you get into the whole tool thing, you need to think about your budget. And this is going to look really different for everybody because people have different philosophies on this too. Like some people, if you literally do not have the money, you can't invest. And then some people, depending on what you're building and trying to accomplish, will, open a line of credit or take out a loan or get a grant or use a credit card and go ahead and charge things knowing that you're going to make an investment. And I would say, you just have to decide for yourself what that's going to look like, and your why may play into that as well. If your why is just to help people and not make money, then you may not want to have a big budget ever. But if your plan is to, launch something that's going to end up making you a lot of money, I wanted to say 6 figures and I had to stop myself because I'm just sick of everybody talking about 6 figures. But if you're, thinking about that long term, a lot of times you do have to make more money. And I was just listening to a podcast today, the Heart, Soul, and Hustle podcast with Zach Spuckler, and he was talking about reverse engineering a launch where he knew how much money he wanted to make. And so he set aside an amount of money that, he probably had ahead of time. He didn't say, maybe he charged it for Facebook ads. And actually you usually pay for Facebook ads after the fact. And so it may have just been like a good faith thing, but it was, like a couple $1,000s. Now they made, I think it was like 5,000, but they made, aside from expenses, I think they ended up making like 56,000. So like a 66,000 if you added in the expenses or before you took those out. But, that's one kind of investment. That's a smart investment, but you have to decide for you because you may not know what your return is going to be. And I can't tell you that. So just think about that before you get into these questions. You have to have an idea what your budget is and maybe consider like the monthly and yearly, because some of the tools charge you once and some of them charge you annually and some of them charge you monthly. Okay, so now that you've figured out your why in this really quick amount of time, let's go ahead, and now you know your budget. So let's go ahead and do the questions. And these are in no order necessarily. They're not in like a hierarchy of ask this question first. Some of them are really related and actually very close to one another. And I'll try to explain the distinctions and why they're separate questions. So let's go. Questions to help you decide between free and paid tools. Okay, the first that I have is, will it save you time? So is this particular tool going to actually save you time? Because we all talk about time being money. And even though you may not literally get paid by the hour if you're working kind of for yourself and building your own thing, your time is really valuable and you can't get it back. And so if the tool will save you money, I think that's a really good indication that you may want to buy it. So for me, I have to be pretty extreme about this. It has to save me hours. If that's the only thing it does, it just depends. I mean, if it's going to save me time doing something I hate, yeah, then I might be more likely to pay for it. But if it's, like, oh, well, this will save you some time, but it's also kind of mindless scheduling work that you could do while watching Netflix, then I may not pay for that. Another question, will it propel you forward? Some tools really do have the ability to move your business forward. And an example for me has been ConvertKit, which is my email service provider that I use. And I do a lot of content upgrades, which are freebies within a post. I do a lot of segmenting and targeting and using some of those advanced tools. And it has worked really, really well for me. And it did absolutely propel me forward with list growth and all those things. And so you need to think about, will the tool propel you forward? Is there a learning curve? And that's kind of a weird question, but some of the tools, think about Photoshop, for example, and that's not one that I use. Maybe you score a good deal on Photoshop and you want to use that so you can have better images. Photoshop has a learning curve and it's not necessarily all that easy. And I found I was actually using Photoshop a few years ago and, knew kind of enough to be dangerous, which is how I am with a lot of things. But I found I was much faster if I used Canva or PicMonkey. And when I looked at my blog images, they did not look any different. And so it felt nice to be able to say I used Photoshop. I felt fancier and more like a real person or a real photo image kind of person, but it didn't save me time. Not at all. It took more time. And so is there a learning curve with the tool? Because you have to take that into account. Do you have the time to actually learn it? Do you want to actually learn it? Is it something you're going to want to do? And that's important. Do you need it now? Like right now? And I think that's a good question, especially if you are on a budget and you have to be really careful about the things that you are paying for. Do you have to have it right this second? Because we do get that itchy trigger finger and we know we want things, but we don't always need them right now. Your business may not be at a place where you need to buy ConvertKit, for example. Maybe MailChimp is just doing fine for you at the moment, so you may not need it now. Or using that same example, if you're going to start putting content upgrades and freebies in a lot of your posts, MailChimp is really clunky for that right now, unless they come out with some new features, whereas ConvertKit makes that super, super simple to kind of integrate your already, like if you're already subscribed, people want to get that content upgrade, so they're not going to get 10 million emails from you. Whereas MailChimp, it separates them out. That's a very techie kind of conversation. But all that to say, you may need it now or you may not, but you need to think about, do you need it now? And a partner question to that is there a unique deal? Because maybe you don't need something right now. And the example I'm giving in my post is Camtasia. And Camtasia does have a learning curve. And so I bought that tool. I know that I will use it. And I've gone through one of the tutorials and then was like, man, I don't have time for this. And I'm not actually editing any videos right now. And so we're going to wait. But in the next 2 weeks, I need to learn to use it. So I will. But I bought it when I bought it because there was a unique deal through AppSumo, of course. And it was a product I'd been thinking about buying anyway. And when I saw the deal, I was like, yep, buying it now, even though, no, I don't need it now. But there is a unique deal for just right now. And so that's why I bought it. Will it have a direct impact on reaching your goals? So I think this is really important to think about because, some tools are really fun and pretty and we like them and they make our lives happier places to be, but they may not actually accomplish your goal. And an example of this for me was last year I purchased Pat Flynn's Smart Podcast Player. And that was kind of a monthly deal. And what it did is it made, a really pretty player for the podcast, both on my podcast page and also within the posts. And it made it more easy for people to share things and play. And it was just really nice and pretty. You could brand it and do a lot of other things with it. So that's nice. But it didn't affect my downloads. It didn't affect anything having to do with how well my podcast was performing. And so I was really stripping down some of my expenses and just taking out anything unnecessary. And that was one of those things that was pretty, but it didn't do anything. I mean, I'm very happy with the custom Libsyn player that I can get. And Matt McCarrick, thanks, Matt, showed me how to do that and actually set those up for me. And so now when I embed the player, if you're looking at the blog post, which is creativewriting.com/060, you will see the pretty little custom player from Libsyn. And so I'm already paying Libsyn. I didn't need to pay Pat Flynn too. Sorry, Pat Flynn. It's a really neat tool, but it didn't meet a need. It didn't actually help me reach my goals. It just made my site prettier and I liked it. So a related question to that is it necessary for your goals? So the first one I just said will have a direct impact. And that's a little bit more specific and measurable. This one is it necessary? So one of the things I've been on kind of the fence about is paying for a scheduling tool. And, I use Hootsuite to schedule Twitter when I get in there, but there's 2 different kinds of scheduling you can do. And I actually have a post about this I'll link to, but you can schedule things or automate things. And when you automate things, there's a lot of tools that will do this for you where you kind of upload what many of them call a content library. Like say you upload links to all of your posts, a description, and an image. And you upload them into a library, all of them, hit kind of auto schedule, add new posts as you have them. And that tool will just kind of push out that content. So you're not constantly having to remember to share your own content. And I'm getting more organized on my site. I've actually I couldn't make a spreadsheet because I hate them. And then I realized why, because now I have like this 50-page document. But anyway, I made a document with all the blog posts, not done yet, with their names and 3 different maybe like short phrases or quotes from those blog posts and the link and an image so that I can set up or pay a virtual assistant to set up some kind of content library. But when I was looking at the tools, Edgar's one a lot of people use. It's like $50 a month. And I was debating and I was like, okay, that would make my life easier. So maybe I should just do it. And then I realized, okay, I'm not going to use it for Facebook because Facebook, I've heard varying things, but for me, Facebook does not get any reach if I'm on my page and I'm scheduling through another tool. I have to do it. I can schedule through Facebook itself, but if I schedule other places, it's not effective. So essentially a tool like Edgar, I'd be using for Twitter, and Twitter does not bring me a lot of traffic. Twitter is where I connect with people more. And so it's not going to really impact my goals overall. It's not necessary for my goals. I do pay for Pinterest schedules. I use Ahology sometimes, which is free, but I also pay for Tailwind, which has a really, really easy, nice scheduling system and just some fantastic analytics and other things. And also Board Booster, and I have someone kind of running the Board Booster side of things for me. And the reason I pay for those tools is because those really are necessary for my goals. Pinterest brings me the majority of my traffic, and I have seen over the years how that traffic lasts. When you get traffic from Pinterest, it's kind of like those dogs that bite you and then don't let go. It's a terrible analogy, but it's what came to mind. So Pinterest, once you have stuff on there and you have it set up and things getting pinned, they get pinned for years and you don't have to keep going in. I mean, yes, you have to be active on Pinterest. You can repin things to new boards, but I have seen pins of mine from like 3 years ago that I only pinned one time because I'm a lazy pinner, hence me paying now for these scheduling tools. But I've seen those constantly bring traffic month after month to my site from a pin that I did 3 years ago. And I don't see any other platforms doing that. So for me, I'm not going to pay for a scheduler that's just doing Twitter because that's not necessary for my goals. It's not helping me achieve anything, but paying for a Pinterest scheduler will bring me the traffic that has kept my site afloat and kept people coming day after day, month after month, even if I take some time off. But I feel like if it's working for me without being intentional, let's go ahead and pay and be intentional. Another question, does it take on a job that you don't have to do? And I heard this advice once, and I can't remember who said it, but a lot of times the things that you want to kind of pass off to other people are the things that don't have to have you in them. And so for some people, this might include a blog post, like your post writing. For me, I write all my posts and I'm a writer and I'm going to write all my posts. Every now and then I have a guest post, but I don't pretend like it's me. Some bloggers barely write anything and they hire ghostwriters for everything, or they hire contributors and they actually pay them and they do name them and everything, but they are not involved in that. For them, the growth of their blog does not depend on their unique voice. I'm sure the best bloggers, if they're hiring people, have someone with a similar perspective, because otherwise it would just be weird. But for me, that doesn't work. Okay. But that may be the thing, like, I don't have to write my blog posts because I'm doing this other stuff. And so you can hire that out. One tool, so I said I don't want to pay for Twitter schedulers. One tool that I'm always wanting to buy, but it's so expensive, is Social Quant. And I think it's $50 a month. But I did a free trial, which was like 2 weeks. And what Social Quant does is it goes along that same method that I have to find targeted followers, which is I go in and look for people who are either talking about the topics I talk about, or I look at someone else who's doing the thing I want to do. And then I kind of go follow that person's followers, or I follow the people they follow. And most of the time people follow you back. They don't always, but when they do, then you gain targeted followers. And you can use something like Crowdfire, which is also free or paid, to kind of go back once a month and unfollow people who aren't following you back, unless they're like celebrities or people who have great content that you don't care whether they follow you back. But Social Quant does that for you. It allows you to set up the keywords and tools and have everything kind of that it needs to have its machine or whatever run its algorithm, or however it works. I don't need to know how it works. It's fine. But you set up those targeted words and everything else, and it will go follow people for you. And then after a couple of days, if they're not following you back, it will unfollow them. So when I used Social Quant for like 2 weeks, I think I gained like 1,000 Twitter followers. It was crazy. And I know that they were more targeted because it was only people that Social Quant was seeking out that I told them to seek out. So there's an example, like Twitter, it doesn't bring me a lot of traffic, but it does bring me great connections. And I've met a lot of people and talked to a lot of people and made connections through Twitter. And so to me, that's more worth it to have those targeted followers than necessarily to have the traffic from my links going out. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it's good to think about what jobs do not need you in them, and then hire someone or hire a tool to do that job for you. Does it fall under shiny object syndrome? And I know you know what I'm talking about. There are some things that just get us, and we're so excited. We really want them. We can't stop seeing them. We get just super excited about them and we really want them. But I don't know. When we invest in these kinds of shiny object tools, where we just can't stop thinking about them, we're obsessed over them, sometimes what happens is we buy them and they really disappoint because it's just shiny object. We hear everybody talking about the buzz. It's just one of those things. They have a great sales page, something like that, where we just get obsessed about them and then they disappoint. Or you may realize that you didn't actually need it. It was just shiny object syndrome. So I'm not saying you shouldn't buy something you're super excited about, because that may be the tool you need, but you have to kind of distinguish, like, okay, ask yourself some of the other questions. Like, does it meet these other needs? Or am I just like really excited about this pretty fun thing because that's something that happens. Do you need it or do you want it? And this is really similar. What is a need? Like I have a need for hosting, for podcasting. And because I've been doing 2 episodes a week, I'm actually going to have to pay more this month. So yay. But I need that. If I don't have hosting for my media files, I don't have a podcast you can listen to. So that's an example of something you need versus thinking back to Pat Flynn's smart podcast player. I just wanted that and I didn't need it. Will it save or make you money? So a lot of these tools may cost something, but they may bring you something in return as well. And that Facebook ads example I gave where I talked about Zach Spuckler and his launch through Heart, Soul, and Hustle, he paid, $5,000, but it made him money. And he actually had a way to track that because he's fancy like that. And so he actually could track exactly how many sales came from those Facebook ads versus the sales that came from his own people. And it was the majority of the money from his launch. So is a tool going to save or make you money? And so that may make it more of an investment worthy of your money, especially if it's something more expensive. But is there a cheaper version that works just as well? So thinking about something like Lead Pages, which is a tool that I use, a lot of people attribute great success and money to Lead Pages, and I like it. It works, but I'm kind of always on the fence. And when my subscription comes back around to be renewed, I'm going to think about it because there are other alternatives. And yes, it's the most, researched in terms of pages that convert well, and they're amazing about conversion and being smart about that. But there are other pages that work really well too. And if I'm not making a ton of money that I can attribute to my sales pages from Lead Pages, why wouldn't I use something like Thrive Pages, which is a plugin you pay one time. I don't think it's once a year, and it's a lot less money than Lead Pages. So if you're not making direct amounts of money from Lead Pages, then can you use a cheaper version? Is Thrive Pages going to work just as well to have a landing page, to have those opt-in boxes pop up? Something you can think about. And this isn't the same for everybody. And everybody, this is the other thing. I'm going to get into this in a second, but people will not all have the same opinion. And depending on your goals, your why, and all the things that you are building and doing, what makes money for you may be different than somebody else. So you may need that more expensive version while somebody else could get by with the cheaper one. Is there a recurring fee? This is one I don't always look out for, but I was talking with someone about a course building software, and it looks great because it's one price, but then when you read on, which you really had to read and dig and find it, you had to pay every year if you want any kind of support or to get the updates on the plugin. So it's not really a one-time fee. So you need to kind of look for hidden fees, but also you need to look, okay, is this a monthly fee? Is this a yearly fee? Is it a one-time fee? It's not to say that you should only buy one of those types of products, but you just should know ahead of time because it may not be as good of a deal as you think. And does the tool do the work of several tools? And my example for this is Pop-Up Ally. And I'm going to have a link. Actually, we'll have an affiliate link to this in the show notes because I recently bought the pro version of Pop-Up Ally and I love it. It does the work of a bunch of different tools. So I had been using SumoMe earlier in the year for pop-ups, welcome mats, which are the things that kind of come, like if you go to a website and something comes down and covers everything and is like, hey, you want to get into the email? And you can click, enter your email or click that away. And I've actually gotten really sick of those. So I haven't used them in a while. But if you want to use welcome mats, as those are called, pop-ups, or those smart bars that go across the very top or very bottom, SumoMe had a lot of options and it was free. But I found last year, my first issue was that they were not getting the emails to my email service provider. And I found just hundreds and hundreds, I think it was like 700 emails trapped in SumoMe that had never made it over. And I know there was some debate in different groups about whether they were just people that never confirmed, but none of them ever hit. And I can't believe that 700 out of 700 people would never have confirmed getting an email. So, or confirmed that they wanted to get on my list. And so in any case, I dropped that tool then, but it also then later upgraded to being only a paid version, or I guess the tools, the functionality that works really well is now something you have to pay for. So a lot of people were out of SumoMe. So I was trying to think, okay, I need to get a new smart pop-up. I could use Lead Pages because that's one of the tools, but I don't really like how their pop-ups look as much. And ConvertKit has some modal forms, but they seem to fight with the CSS on my blog. And so I'm okay with not using those. And I was looking at like 3 or 4 different options. Each of them cost a certain amount of money. Each of them had different functionalities. And I was like toggling back and forth between all of these tabs. And then I remembered Kirsten Thompson, who came on one of the episodes, I think it was 43, and she talked about email lists as well. She's a big nerd. In a good way, Kirsten. Big nerd like me about email stuff, but she uses the free version, or maybe the paid now, of Pop-Up Ally, and had mentioned it. And so I went and looked at that, and the paid version has an amazing amount of things. You can do, I think, 9 different kinds of opt-in forms. So you can do a pop-up, you can do a smart bar up top and the bottom. You can do what's called a feature box, which is maybe like a bigger strip that happens just below the header of your blog. You can do a sidebar. You can do, I can't even remember all the different options. They're pretty amazing. You can do exit intent only pop-ups. You can do pop-ups on a timer, pop-ups only on certain pages. You can actually get the code in so that your people who are already subscribed do not see your pop-ups. And these were just tons of functionality things, options I did not see other places, or I was going to have to get 3 different things, like 3 plugins to do the work if I wanted to have a smart bar up top and then also a welcome mat and also a pop-up somewhere. First of all, that's too many things at one time, but say I did want that, I would have to use 3 different tools to get it or pay something monthly. And Pop-Up Ally was one time fee, and you can customize all the forms with your own fonts from your blog, your own colors, and it's really amazing. It took me a little bit to set them up, but they were not hard. It's just kind of that learning curve of figuring out, okay, like this is what you have to do, but it's not hard. It's kind of drag and drop. So for me, that tool was totally worth it, even though I wasn't planning to shell out on a pop-up tool. Totally worth it because it does the work of a bunch of tools. What do other people say? Now, you're going to get conflicting information all across the board with these tools, but you should ask anyway, because maybe you'll get the same story from everybody. Or maybe some tools work for some people and some not for others. And it's good to hear those stories. So you should definitely ask your friends, ask people you trust, ask in blogger groups about specific tools and what people use and see what they say. What is the return policy? And this is really a big one. And I forget about this because I just do. I think I'm going to like everything and so I don't look. But I know I recently purchased a plugin. I wanted a feature box. And so again, that's like the, below your header of your blog, you would have like this nice box that would have an email opt-in right there with a form that stays there all the time, right there below your header. And it kind of integrates nicely into your blog. And I found one that did that for you, but I could not get it to look right on my blog. And they, their support was really great. They were like, we'll help design it for you. But the problem with that is I was like, well, okay, but then I change my blog design or update something and I don't like it anymore. I'm going to have to come to you. I can't do it myself. It was just a pain. And so thankfully they did have a return policy and I returned it and that was fine. But I know, especially like with some courses and things, you need to look at the fine print because I've definitely seen courses where the return policy was that you had to actually prove that you had done the coursework, all of the coursework, and you had to do it within a certain amount of days. Things that made it pretty impossible to get your money back from these things. So you definitely want to look and see what the return policy is. So those are some of the main questions. It's a lot of questions. I'm sure there are more, and I'd love to hear what things you think about when it comes down to buying a tool. But I think the overall theme, if you kind of round all these up, is you want to think about, your why, your budget. You will need to think about if you need it, if it accomplishes those goals, if it needs you to be in it, or if it's something you can kind of delegate or pay out. And then kind of the tool itself, how is the pay structured? Is it worth it? Is there something free that's better? Is there a return policy? Does it offer, things that other tools don't, or extras or freebies? And so you can kind of think about the tool itself, your needs, your budget, and kind of put that together to make a decision. And try not to get too excited by shiny object syndrome, as difficult as that is. And try not to buy every deal that you see on AppSumo, because that's a hard one. Okay, this was a lot of talking. Usually these are shorter episodes, but I get really excited about tools and I have learned a lot and returned a lot of things and tried to be really smart about the limited budget that I have so that I can do the most with what I have. So I hope that is helpful to you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts. creativewriting.com/0 There are still a few days left if you're listening to this on Thursday, maybe one day left to look at Nick Stevenson's course and the bonuses I'm offering. So you can find that at createifwriting.com/Nick. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you have an inspired week.